Compliance, corporate governance, all kinds of issues can hit the media very quickly and create scandals. And every scandal changes the way that people think about business. It changes how governments think about business. It produces new kinds of regulations, and in the middle of those new regulations, compliance officers have to try and work out what to do. And the trouble is this: you can comply with every single regulation that's published by government, that's been reported on by the media, and you will stay out of prison. That's the good news. If you are the chairman of a bank, comply perfectly and you will be fine, in theory. But in practice, it's not that easy. I'll tell you why. You see, every time there is a headline and the world changes, you find yourself complying with history. See, you're complying with regulations which were produced as a result of a previous scandal, which led to a government inquiry that happened years ago. So, on the one hand, you think that you're complying perfectly with everything that anyone can possibly require of you, but on the other hand, the world moves on. A good example of this is in bribery, and which is now considered to be a corrupt activity in many parts of the world, but not all. In fact, in some countries today, it is still almost impossible to do business without paying a bribe. Now, in some European Union countries, about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, it was not only legal to bribe, but you could actually claim back the tax on it. So what that meant was that the more you bribed, the more tax back you got. The government was actually paying you to bribe, whether it was a large payment to a particular Central Asian country or a chief, or whether it was a Minister of Trade and Industry in some African country, or wherever it was. Whatever you needed to do, so long as it was seen as a legitimate business expense, not something for your own pocket, then you can claim it against tax. The trouble is the world has changed. See, imagine the predicament of a board member of one of the largest banks in the world, who is phoned by CNN or CNBC or Fox News or the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times. And by the way, you can hear a pin drop when I have this conversation with large multinationals about these kinds of issues. Let's imagine the conversation. Here's the board member, they're on the phone, they're just taking a call. And the call is, hello, Richard, we have some emails we want you to comment on. Oh, yes? The emails go back to 1996, 7, 8. Okay. The emails show that you knew about two $10 million payments that were made to a particular Ministry of Defense, let's say, in the year 1996, 1995, 1994, as a result of which you got permission to do all kinds of things in that particular country. Would you like to comment? Well, if the person can even remember what was in those emails, assuming that he was only copied them, then he's in for a bit of a problem. Because he can argue, say, well, the emails were there, I never denied that we made those payments, or perhaps he had. But either way, he will say those payments were legitimate, they were audited in our accounts, we got the tax back from the government on them, there was nothing illegal about them. And then the newspaper comes back again and says, yes, at the time they were legal, but of course in today's climate such payments would be against the law, correct? And you say, well, of course. In fact, is it not true that if someone was to make a similar payment in your organisation today, that you would sack them immediately, that you would inform the police, that they would prosecute the person, and that you would encourage them to put them in prison and throw away the key? Is that correct? You say, well, is it correct? Well, of course, we are having to comply with all of these new standards. That's right, and they're good standards, are they not? Your company presumably is in favour of the new anti-corruption legislation that's being passed in a number of countries worldwide. Yes or no? We think these kinds of things aren't a good idea. So what you're saying then is that if an employee does today what you did then, it was legal then, it's illegal now. But if they were to do today what you did then, that you would make sure that they were sacked, that you'd see they were put in prison. So, well, it's not our job to prosecute. Yes, but you would follow the law. Correct. So what's happening now is the individual is being manoeuvred to a place where they're being forced by that interviewer to admit that even though what they did those years ago was perfectly legal, it complied 100% in every year with every piece of legislation and every regulation, even though it 100% complied, that by today's standards, that compliance would be seen to be immoral at best, illegal at worst, and that in fact, what that individual did then was morally wrong, even if it was legally right. So you can see that complying with every regulation may just keep you out of prison, and it probably will, but it will not protect your brand, it will not protect your job, it will lead to the destruction perhaps of your entire organisation. So the lesson then we learn is that compliance is a basic standard, it's an absolute minimum, but we have to go way beyond that. And that is very tough if you are, let's say, a large international law firm advising multinationals on complying with latest technology standards or something. Because what you're having to say is this: in the past we would have just read the regulations, we would have interpreted them, we would have made a guess about how the courts will apply them, and we would have drawn up some guidance for you, and you would have created policy as a result of that. No longer. Now, a large international legal firm has to give a different kind of advice. That firm is now having to guess about the emotional climate in future. It's having to consider what kinds of new scandals could emerge, how those things could affect the public mood, how what is acceptable today in a certain area might be an area that's viciously attacked tomorrow, how a reputation that could be beautiful today could be utterly destroyed tomorrow as a result simply of a shift in public opinion. So compliance teams are having to think very carefully, not about the legal status or regulation, but about what are the fundamental values that underpin our business, the things that we should be proud of in 10 to 15 years' time. That the way we do our business, every transaction that we do, how we handle the environment, how we treat our employees, where we build our factories, the kinds of investments we make, all of these things are based on values that we know are unshakable and we will not be deflected from just because of another newspaper headline. That's a very tough call, but that is exactly where boards and senior teams are finding themselves and will do so increasingly in the future.